Hi guys, I hope you're all well and smiling. I wanted to talk today about the Kamloops Residential School because it's such a massive story with so many different facets of the story that are finally coming to the public eye. And this is decades and decades after so many survivors have come forward. There's been court cases. And finally now in 2021, we're actually seeing, the media, so the BBC and other media outlets actually admit that there are human remains that have been, remains, but child remains that have been discovered at the school. So the school itself closed in 1978, and there's been a number of survivors that have come forward, telling stories of child sexual abuse, of genocide, of just the extreme abuse that happened to the native Canadian children in these schools. And it's important to remember that, very similar to what happened in Australia with our Aboriginal people, these children actually had families, the majority of them. Some of them were orphaned, but the program really was about the children being put through these schools because they needed to be basically indoctrinated. The whole colonisation that we've seen throughout history with the very British rule coming into different countries has been completely annihilate, overtake anyone existing in the country, and they're all considered subservient. They're considered just animals really, and you can really see that by the treatment of these poor people. And the survivors have come forward and they've told about the abuse. They've told about the murder, the rape of the children in these institutions, and they've been asking for these areas to be dug out for mass graves, because a number of the survivors had suggested there were particular places at the residential school where children were buried in big numbers. And the other story that this links into is there's a survivor called William Coombs. He was the last remaining survivor of 3 that was testifying to say that the Queen and Prince Phillip actually visited the school, and that's where the stories of the 10 children that were taken on the picnic went missing. They were the smartest kids in the class, never to be seen again. And obviously he was ridiculed. Everything was said to be made up. There's fact checker articles saying the Queen never visited Canada at that time, etc., etc. And it's such a big breaking story because for so many decades, all of this has been completely denied. And William and the testimonies of the other 3 survivors that saw the Queen leave with these children who were never seen again were actually part of a number of court cases. So they tried to take these issues through courts in the UK, in Canada, with the assistance of other advocates, and got absolutely nowhere. And finally they were able to take these stories and these allegations through a common law court, so a people's court in Brussels. And this is where, it was in 2013, 6 judges actually found the Queen, the Pope, and 27 other elites guilty of the disappearance in 50,000 children from the residential schools and from Canada. So native Canadian children, never to be seen again. And the interesting thing there is, even though the court found there was enough evidence to completely, charge these people with genocide of children in Canada, nothing happened. And I guess that just shows you even when these charges are laid against the elites, even if we find a court that we're able to take all the evidence through to have these charges made, the question becomes, who's going to actually arrest them? Is it going to be the police? Is it going to be the armies? like they all work under under the Queen and under these people. So it's just been an ongoing saga, and it's really it's such a sorrowful story of the suffering of children, and it will be interesting to see how more and more of this comes to light, because it's been 215 children's remains have been found, whereas we know that there are going to be huge numbers of other graves to be found, both on that property in the Kamloops Residential School, but also on other properties. That wasn't the only one operating at that time, which is what the survivors' families and the survivors remaining will tell you as well. And another interesting facet of that story is after the charges were laid by the Brussels Common Law Court, and I guess things had come to a standstill, there was an activist called David Compton, and he had the balls, I guess you could say, to actually go and put out those warrants for the Queen, for the Pope, and for other elites to let the public know exactly what the Common Law Court had found and what they had charged these people with. And he very suspiciously, after doing this, ended up in a psychiatric ward for many months. I think it was for nearly a year before he was finally released, once most of this had blown over. So yeah, a huge story of the cover-up of the abuse of children by people in power. And it's so sorrowful, and I'll share a few more articles that are starting to come out now from the Canadian independent journalists, and there's such an outpouring of sorrow and emotions by the Canadian people, because they've really been disbelieved for so very long. And these survivors are in this place now where they're like, we told you so. We've lived through 30, 40 decades, 30, 40 years, I should say. So several decades of really being told, you're lying, this isn't true. The police have investigated, the government have investigated, and there's nothing there. And then finally all of this is coming to light. So it is great to see that the truth is finally coming out, as it is all over the world. But I really hold the people in Canada very close to my heart at the moment, because it's such a sorrowful story to know and for people to understand. And I'm so happy that they're finally getting the acknowledgement, and the public finally being made aware and understanding the suffering of their people. But that doesn't end it. Like there's demands at the moment for an apology. There's also demands saying, what is an apology going to do? And I posted yesterday an incredible interview by Murray Sinclair, who's been working on the committee for Kamloops around the investigation. And as he was saying, it's not just an apology that needs to be made. These survivors need the support systems. They need to be brought together. They need to. It's all about the healing now, both for them, for the people of Canada, and for the world. And we really need to ensure that these things are understood, they're out in the open, so they never happen again. So yeah, that's a bit of a summary of the long story of the awful things that happened in Kamloops. And it really does remind me of so much of the stolen generations here with the Aboriginal people in Australia, and I'm sure that much more of that will come to light soon as well. And also of the children that were brought out to Australia from the UK. And there was instances where they were told their parents had died, their parents didn't want them, and they were really brought out as slaves, and that was in the 1940s, so not too long ago. And there's still survivors from that horrific government operation speaking out about that today. So it's an emotional time, I think, for all survivors, for all people that are aware of what's going on, and let's send out our love and our light to all of these people, especially the people in Canada, but all of the survivors all around the world that really deserve our support and our compassion in their search for justice, for their search for truth, for all of these things that have happened to the children on their lands. Thank you, and I will chat to you soon. Much love.